Hey everyone, and welcome back to another roundup. So, Google are really not instilling confidence with Stadia. Warcraft 3 Reforged's EULA actually has a more hardcore legal language than is usual, and you really do need to know about it. Then Platinum Games, they are doing a really strange thing in Kickstarter, and we've got even more with an absolutely tremendous win for games preservation happening recently. Now, if you're new here, then hey, we're an indie game studio. We also do 6 game industry news and analysis videos per week, so if you're down for that, hit that sub button, and if you want to help us out, smash that like, helps us with the algorithm, and with that, let's get into the video. So Stadia has had a rather quiet time as of late, and we covered that in last week's Friday roundup. There just hasn't been that much content on the platform at all, and this led to a big Stadia Reddit thread that then prompted a response from Google. So Google's rep said that they understand where players' frustrations are coming from, but they really offered little comment beyond that kind of glib reassurance. More telling, though, is the response that was actually received by GameIndustry.biz. So, a Google representative reached out to them and took issue with the Reddit complaints, and the Google rep said that basically the Stadia team have been publishing weekly updates via the Stadia forums and monthly updates via the Google keyword blog. Now look, that absolutely is true. They have been communicating there, but it's also somewhat missing the point because guess what? People actually want details and they want knowledge about the games that are going to be on the platform that was actually sold to them by Google. Now, the core of Stadia users' complaints is just a lack of details on pretty much anything. We know that the Stadia team, right, they are tracking 120 games coming to the platform in this year, and that more than 10 of those games are going to be launch exclusives for Stadia. And that's all we've got. We've got basically no names, no involved studios, nothing. Now, the reasoning here, according to the Google representative, is that Google want to leave it up to the publishers to make the announcements about their IP/games. And now, I think that's actually an understandable, correct thing in principle, but here's what I would say. Google, you sold people onto your platform, and that actually sets an expectation for people that you've lined out lots of content for them. So the onus here is on Google to set up a content schedule that's actually good for Stadia users. Yet here they're basically hiding behind saying, oh, that's for the publishers to decide. Actually, Google, what you needed to have done well in advance was to go to all those publishers and work out having X amount of games per month solidly for the entire period of time. That's not really what you've done, but for Google, actually in a business term, it sort of gets a bit worse. Why? Well, we've got to remember that Stadia Pro is a subscription service. Now, additionally, the insinuation that Google will only announce the exclusives coming to Stadia doesn't really hold up that much. I mean, more than 10 exclusives coming in the first half of 2020, something they said. That means more than 10 games in the next 5 months, and not a single one of those games has even been announced. So that does seem a little bit weird and fishy. And then passing the buck off to the publishers, that's only going to get Google so far here. The Stadia team seem rather determined to leave their player base in the dark, and they clearly just were not ready here. That does not inspire confidence in the platform, and that's extremely relevant because, as I said, it's a subscription service. Stadia Founders Editions shipped with 3 months of Stadia Pro, and that renewal date is fast approaching. Google really are running out of time to actually convince people to stick around with their platform. And overall, is this a big evil plan? I would actually say no, not really. It's so incompetent in its execution as an overall consumer-facing value proposition that I'm just going to put this down to Google probably had a pretty good idea for a cloud service, and they just managed to mess up the content lineup and then just about every detail of making a good service for customers. Of course, xCloud is probably going to clobber them, but with that, let's move on to the next story. Yep, it's yet more Warcraft 3 Reforged. So, we covered Blizzard's response yesterday. I would recommend checking that video out if you've not already. But in other news, well, it's got the lowest user score on Metacritic. It's got a 0.5, and that's alongside a 61 Metascore. Now, the damning user score, that's more a reflection of just the whirlwind of ill feeling that game has actually attracted from people. And in case you're wondering about some other ones, well, Fallout 76 has a user score of 2.7. Metal Gear Survive, another beloved game, 1.2. Yeah, people are not happy with Blizzard, even to the point where people were upvoting Day 1 Gary's Incident, a true disaster, to make its score higher than Warcraft 3. Now, Warcraft 3 Reforged is a better game than Gary's Incident, yes, but I think we all get the point here. Now, I mentioned this next bit at the end of yesterday's video, but many will have missed that, and it does bear repeating because it's extremely important. After that, though, we do have an interesting new bit of news. So, after last week's stories of denied refunds and even some bans for discussing refunds in the forums, Blizzard seemed to have overhauled overhauled their approach. Several Reddit users are now reporting, and a lot of people who've hit me up in messages as well, reporting access to immediate refunds for Warcraft 3 purchases via the automated customer service site. Now, this basically indicates, right, that Blizzard have opened up the criteria for whom the automated system is available to in response to this criticism. And let's be real, that's the right move, okay? There's no shadow of a doubt there. That is what Blizzard should have done. Now, that said, there is a point here that PC Gamer brought up about the EULA, and it's one that actually gives Blizzard more rights to your work than you may think. Now, it's pretty standard for a company to own what is made on its platform, and, that which involves their property. It's like that for most creation kits, such as Skyrim's, but PC Gamer's Tyler Wilde rather astutely points out that typical agreements usually give the company non-exclusive rights, but that Blizzard's claims exclusive rights. Now, this is highly relevant. So Tyler points out that with non-exclusive, you still own the parts of the mod that are wholly original and are yours. So if you made custom art and custom music for your mod, it would be yours. So maybe if you and a team of people made a Skyrim mini expansion, and in the process you made a score, I believe you would have the rights to commercially exploit that score. You would just have to, not use any of Bethesda's trademarks or anything that they own in, your publishing of that score. Well, at least that's what I believe. Now, with Blizzard's exclusive contract, things are a little bit different. They entirely own all of your work that's published up in their platform, even that which is wholly original. Why? Well, as Wild points out, Dota. Dota, like just the name Dota, Defense of the Ancients, got nothing to do with Blizz. I mean, it's just not their name. Right? Now, they try to argue that Dota's association with Warcraft 3, because Dota was a Warcraft 3 custom map, that means that it should be theirs, but that got nowhere in court, and they ended up having to settle with Valve. And that's why this contract ties you down so hard. Now, what would worry me here is that, it's like covering all work in a mod. So could that even apply to things like designs? I mean, if you made a popular Warcraft 3 Reforged mod, but then you took that to Unity, changed some of the art, got a team together, made it. I mean, if Blizzard wholly owned all parts of your mod, could there be problems there, even with some of the design of the game? It's hard to say. Now, look, that's just technically speaking. I really do doubt that Blizzard would actually go after something like that unless they saw it was going to be the next big thing like Dota that, they would not want to miss out on again. But overall, I just say, number one, thank you to Tyler Wilde for pointing that out. That was a very interesting article. And I mean, the other thing is, it's something we've got to deal with, right, in what we do as a studio. But yeah, knowing your IP law and all that stuff is actually really important, especially if you're going to be going into game development. And one of the best ways to start with game development is actually to make custom maps and to really start testing things. So, yeah, it's an important story, even though it maybe to many would just seem like boring legal text. Next, though, onto a good story. So, one of the biggest complaints about Warcraft 3 Reforged is that it shares a client with the original Warcraft 3, and the original Warcraft 3, like actual Classic War 3, has effectively been erased from existence, because now all you can get is Reforged, but without the textures, and models. So, aside from that being a terrible decision that never should have been made, it's also restarted a very important conversation about video game preservation and the historical significance of classic PC gaming. So, back in 2017, Adobe announced that they would be ending support for Adobe Flash at the end of 2017. And since then, the company has been working with firms like Apple and like Google to ensure that the switchover is actually one that is as smooth as is possible. And as of April 2018, less than 5% of websites use Flash. So that is good news, but you might be wondering, where do games come into this? Well, many games have made the jump to more current frameworks, but many did not. And, well, what that kind of would mean is that the incoming death of Flash could mean that this massive library of Flash games has been kicking around the internet for over a decade that's led to so many, major titles that history would just be erased, would disappear. Well, enter Flashpoint. Flashpoint uses open source technology to create a freely downloadable digital library of games and animations. And this list, right now, this is wild. It is a massive 36,000 games, and the community is always taking suggestions for titles that may have been missed to put into it. And as expected, this list, it contains numerous standouts from the venerable stickman genre of Flash games. I mean, come on, you've got to remember them from when you were younger. Things like Bowman. I mean, a lot of them would look rather quaint today, but even balloons, right? Remember that stuff? I mean, if you ever had a school computer class in the mid-2000s, I mean, you knew your way around Miniclip, and I think it was Crazy Monkey and Newsgrounds and all those things. I mean, Flash is just such an important part of gaming history, and it's really good here to see that Flash content being preserved in spite of the march of technology. And hopefully this just means that the desire will be more mainstream. I think one of my favorite games, Freelancer, it's what Chris Roberts did before he took a sabbatical for the film industry and then did Star Citizen. But Freelancer is one of my favorite games. Right now, it's abandonware. You can't get it anywhere bar, if you have discs and find it on the internet, which, it is just on the abandonware website. But it just shows the importance of keeping that history alive. And actually, a good thing in this regard could be the new wave of consoles, because it seems like both of them are going to be having extensive backwards compatibility. And, if that is the case, then obviously that's good for the library of games that you own, and it's actually good for the preservation of game experiences in general, which I think is something that is deeply important, because games, they are the next big art form, and we need to preserve it. We need to, to actually treat it with that respect. And with that, let's move on to, honestly, a really strange one. So there's updates on Platinum Games. Now, Platinum make incredible content. I mean, come on, Nier, Astral Chain, but this one's really bizarre. So Platinum are set to enter the self-publishing world. It's something they've wanted for a long time, but they're kind of doing it with Kickstarter, and it's odd because this week they announced their campaign to bring Wonderful 101 to new platforms. Now, this campaign launched on Monday. It asked for 50 grand to remaster and self-publish the 2013 title on the Nintendo Switch. The stretch goals, then, are 250 grand for a Steam version and 500 grand for a PS4 port. Now, the campaign obviously hit all of those goals within a few hours because it's Platinum and people love their content, rightly so, it is excellent. And as of the time of writing, it's over $1 million from 15,000 backers. Now, before we get onto the odd thing, which is the shipping date for this, there is also the new Platinum 4 teaser website that's popped up this week, and basically it looks like there are 4 games in 2020 for Platinum. We're just going to have to hang on tight to actually see what those games are going to be, and I'm sure they will be really excellent, fun games. But as for this Kickstarter, it's odd, and it's, people are saying it's shady, and I get that. I mean, the main delivery is in April, so, I mean, they can't add backers to the credits. So yes, that port is done. It's done. They can't even put you in the credits. And that means they're basically just using this to onboard their fan base to the game, to get some early money, to sort of just bring people along with that story of them self-publishing. But the thing is, though, the Kickstarter gives people far less consumer protections than through pre-orders through most stores, and really, to me, it does seem like a bit of a needless cash-in in some ways. I mean, yeah, it started now, it's releasing in April. There's a bit of that just doesn't really sit that well for me, because it doesn't seem like any development work needs to be done here, and that's especially following their cash injection from Tencent. Now, they did say that the Tencent money is for new projects, but look, at the end of the day, it all does just boil down to money that's in the company account, so I see this and it feels a bit odd. It really is a strange story, but this campaign, it surely will work out for them. They have that fan love to be able to do that easily. Ultimately, I mean, the best way to see if people want, ports for other platforms, I mean, yeah, it is to ask money for it. It's a hell of a way to test the market, maybe the best way to test the market, and maybe, say, for Steam, because Steam lets them generate keys for free, they would also avoid the store cut, and they'd only deal with the 10% Kickstarter cut. That said, I've got no idea how much Nintendo or Sony charge for generating a key, so it's kind of hard to tell if they'd be missing out on some fees there. It's an interesting one. This is coming from the perspective of someone who's going to be launching a Kickstarter for, our big game in the next, probably the next 6 months, so yeah, it's a really odd one seeing what's going on here. I mean, how many game Kickstarters do you see with a shipping date that's 3 months after? I mean, it kind of just seems like a big way to sell the merch and all of that stuff. But I mean, yeah, it's not something that I'm personally that comfortable with. I think a lot of big fans of Wonderful 101 will probably be happy enough with it, but I've got to imagine that outside of that core base of the people who really love Platinum, there'll be a lot of skepticism over why the decision was made in the way that it was. I mean, personally, I'd understand selling it in Switch and then maybe kickstarting the more expensive ports to other platforms that have a further off release date, but yeah, still, I'd love to know what you've got to say on this one, though. But anyway, that's it for me. If you would like to subscribe, it really does help us out. If you want other content to watch, well, we're publishing a video tomorrow. We published one yesterday in War 3 Reforged. I think you'll enjoy them both. And yeah, with that, thanks, and I'll see you next time.